What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly, where we review the security events that happened in the last week. As always, I've broken the stories down in the timeline, and there is a list of the stories with markers in the description below, so you can click on any of those markers to jump around to any story you want. If you find my work valuable, of course, I ask you to hit the like button and share this episode with anyone you know who can benefit from this information. If you have not already, please also consider subscribing to my channel.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
We start off today with patches. Google has released Chrome 103.0.5060.114 for Windows to fix a high-severity, zero-day Chrome vulnerability tracked as CVE 2022-2294, which is actively exploited in the wild. The flaw is a heap buffer overflow that resides in the Web Real-Time Communications component. It is the fourth zero-day patched by the IT giant in 2022. Google is aware that an exploit for CVE 2022-2294 exists in the wild, reads the advisory published by Google. Google hasn't shared technical details of the attacks that exploited the vulnerability in the wild and have yet to attribute it to a particular threat actor. The vulnerability was reported by Jan Wojtaszek from the Avast Threat Intelligence team on the 1st of July 2022. Access to bug details and links may be kept restricted until a majority of users are updated with a fix. We will also retain restrictions if the bug exists in a third-party library that other projects similarly depend on but haven't yet fixed, for example, Microsoft Edge. The other Chrome zero-day vulnerabilities addressed by Google this year are CVE 2022-1364 back in April, which is a type confusion issue that resides in the V8 JavaScript engine. Then there was CVE 2022-1096 back in March, which was a type confusion in V8 JavaScript engine. And then there was CVE 2022-0609 back in February, which is use after free issue that resides in the animation component. The maintainers of the OpenSSL project fixed a high-severity heap memory corruption issue tracked to CVE 2022-2274, affecting the popular library. This bug makes the RSA implementation with 2048-bit private keys incorrect on such machines and triggers a memory corruption during the computation. A remote attacker can exploit the memory corruption to achieve code execution on the machine while performing the computation. The CVE 2022-2274 vulnerability was introduced in OpenSSL version 3.0.4, which was released on June 21st, 2022. The OpenSSL 3.0.4 release introduced a serious bug in the RSA implementation for x86-64 CPUs supporting the AVX512 IFMA instructions. This issue makes the RSA implementation with 2048-bit private keys incorrect on such machines, and memory corruption will happen during the computation. As a consequence of the memory corruption, an attacker may be able to trigger a remote code execution on the machine performing the computation, reads the advisory published by the project maintainers. SSL, TLS servers, or other servers using 2048-bit RSA private keys running on machines supporting AVX512 IFMA instructions of the x86-64 architecture are affected by this issue. The OpenSSL software library allows secure communications over computer networks against eavesdropping or need to identify the party at the other end. OpenSSL contains an open source implementation of the secure sockets layer and transport layer security protocols. The vulnerability was reported to project maintainers on the 22nd of June by PhD student Ji Ryoyao, who also developed the patch. The flaw has been addressed with the release of OpenSSL version 3.0.5. Users of the library have to upgrade their instances as soon as possible. In June, the security expert Guido Vranken discovered a remote memory corruption vulnerability in the OpenSSL version 3.0.4, which was released on, again, June 21st, 2022. Cybersecurity researchers at Intezer have uncovered a new Linux malware tracked as Orbit that is still undetected. The malware can be installed as a volatile implant either by achieving persistence on the compromised systems. The malware implements advanced evasion techniques and hooks key functions to maintain persistence on the infected systems. Orbit allows operators to achieve remote access capabilities over SSH, harvests credentials, and logs TTY commands. Once the malware is installed, it'll infect all of the running processes, including new processes that are running on the machine, reads the analysis published by the experts. Unlike other threats that hijack shared libraries by modifying the environment variable ld_preload, this malware uses two different ways to load the malicious library. The first way is by adding the shared object to the configuration file that is used by the loader. The second way is by patching the binary of the loader itself, so it'll load the malicious shared object. Experts notice similarities between the threat and the recently disclosed Symbiote malware, which is designed to infect all of the running processes on the compromised machines. Unlike Symbiote, that leverages the ld_preload environment variable to load the shared object, Orbit employs, again, two different methods. First method, shared object is added to the configuration file that is used by the loader. The second one, the binary of the loader is patched to load the malicious shared object. The malicious payload is a shared object that can be placed either in persistent storage, for example, libntp vnqe6mk, or in shim memory under dev shim ldx. Placing the payload in the first path will allow the threat to gain persistence, otherwise it remains volatile. The backdoor hooks the read and write functions to log data that is being written by the executed processes on the infected machine. The attack chain starts with an ELF dropper that extracts the payload, libdlso, and adds it to the shared libraries that are loaded by the dynamic linker. The shared object hooks function from three libraries, libc, libcap, and pluggable authentication module, or known as PAM. Existing processes that use these functions will essentially use the modified functions, and new processes will be hooked with the malicious library as well, allowing the malware to infect the whole machine and harvest credentials, evade detection, gain persistence, and provide remote access to the attackers, continues the experts. The experts pointed out that the malware stands out for its almost hermetic-looking hooking of libraries. Linux threats continue to evolve. Recently, other sophisticated Linux malware were spotted by the researchers in the wild, such as Symbiote and syslog-k. Threats that target Linux continue to evolve while successfully staying under the radar of security tools. Now, Orbit is one more example of how evasive and persistent new malware can be, concludes the report. Cisco released security patches to address a critical vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-20812 with a CVSS score of 9.0 in the Expressway series and telepresence video communication server. A remote attacker can trigger the flaw to overwrite files on the underlying operating system with root privileges. The vulnerability impacts Expressway Control, Expressway C, and Expressway Edge, or Expressway E, devices. A vulnerability in the cluster database API of Cisco Expressway Series and Cisco Telepresence VCS could allow an authenticated remote attacker with administrative write privileges on the application to conduct absolute path traversal attacks on an affected device and overwrite files on the underlying operating system as a root user. The root cause of the vulnerability is the insufficient input validation of user-supplied command arguments. Threat actors can trigger the flaw by authenticating to the system as an administrative read-write user and submitting crafted input to the affected command. The IT giant also addressed a null byte poisoning issue tracked to CVE 2022-20813, also CVS score of 9.0, in Expressway Series and Telepresence VCS. A vulnerability in the certificate validation of Cisco Expressway Series and Cisco Telepresence VCS could allow an unauthenticated remote attacker to gain unauthorized access to sensitive data, reads the advisory. The flaw is due to improper certificate validation. An attacker can trigger the vulnerability by using a man-in-the-middle technique to intercept the traffic between devices, and then using a crafted certificate to impersonate the endpoint. The attacker can view the intercepted traffic in clear text or manipulate it. Both issues have been addressed with the release of Expressway Series and Telepresence VCS version release 14.0.7, but no workarounds that address these vulnerabilities are available. The good news is that the IT giant is not aware of attacks in the wild exploiting these vulnerabilities. Fortinet addressed multiple vulnerabilities in several products of the vendor. Impacted products are FortiADC, FortiAnalyzer, FortiManager, FortiOS, FortiProxy, FortiClient, FortiDeceptor, FortiEDR, FortiNAC, FortiSwitch, FortiRecorder, and FortiVoice Enterprise. 4 of the fixed issues have been rated as high severity. They are CVE 2022-26117, CVE 2021-430-072, CVE 2022-30302, and CVE 2021-41031. The CVE 2022-26117 is an unprotected MySQL root account, an empty password in configuration file vulnerability with the CWE of 258 in Fortinet may allow an authenticated attacker to access the MySQL databases via the CLI. Then there's CVE 2021-43072, which is a stack-based buffer overflow via crafted CLI execute command, a buffer copy without checking size of input, which is a classic buffer overflow, vulnerability CWE1120. In FortiAnalyzer, FortiManager, FortiOS, and FortiProxy may allow a privileged attacker to execute arbitrary code or command via CLI, execute restore image, and execute certificate remote operations with the TFTP protocol. Then there's CVE 2022-30302, which is a path traversal vulnerability. Multiple relative path traversal vulnerabilities in FortiDeceptor management interface may allow a remote and authenticated attacker to retrieve and delete arbitrary files from the underlying file system via specially crafted web requests. CVE 2021-41031, a privilege escalation via directory traversal attack, a relative path traversal vulnerability in FortiClient for Windows, may allow a local unprivileged attacker to escalate their privileges to system via the name pipe responsible for Forti ESNAC service. Django is a free and open source Python-based web framework that follows the model template views architecture pattern. Django is maintained by the independent organization Django Software Foundation. The latest releases of the framework, Django 4.0.6 and 3.2.14, addressed a high-severity SQL injection vulnerability tracked as CVE 2022-34265. According to the release note, the flaw resides in the trunk and extract database functions. It can be exploited if untrusted data was used as a kind lookup name value. Performing inputs annotations for these functions, it is possible to mitigate the risk of exploitation of the flaw. Trunk and extract database functions were subject to SQL injection if untrusted data was used as a kind lookup name value, reads the note. Applications that constrain the lookup name and kind choice to a known safe list are unaffected. The development team also releases security patches as temporary solutions before upgrading to the latest versions. We now move on to attacks, vulnerabilities, and updates. Jenkins is the most popular open source automation server. It is maintained by CloudBees and the Jenkins community. The automation server supports developers build, test, and deploy their applications. It has hundreds of thousands of active installations worldwide with more than 1 million users. The security team at Jenkins disclosed 34 security flaws affecting 29 plugins for the Jenkins automated server. 29 of these issues are yet to be patched. The severity of the flaws range from low to high, and at the time of publication of the advisory, many of the plugins were yet to be fixed, including Build Notification plugin, Build Metrics plugin, Skype Notifier plugin, Cisco Spark plugin, and a bunch more. The list of unpatched vulnerabilities includes cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, missing or incorrect permission checks, along with passwords, API keys, and tokens stored in plain text. The Vulnerability Coordination and Bug Bounty Platform, HackerOne, disclosed that a former employee improperly accessed security reports submitted by white hat hackers to claim additional bounties. The investigation started on June 22, 2022, when a customer asked the company to investigate a suspicious vulnerability disclosure made outside of the HackerOne platform. This suspicious submission was similar to the one submitted through the HackerOne platform. Upon investigation by the HackerOne security team, we discovered a then employee had improperly accessed security reports for personal gain, reads the incident report published by the company. The person anonymously disclosed this vulnerability information outside the HackerOne platform with the goal of claiming additional bounties. According to the company, the threat actor had access to the internal systems between April 4th and June 23rd of 2022. On June 30th, HackerOne terminated the employee. The company identified the unfaithful employee by analyzing internal access logs for systems containing submissions. The experts noticed that only a single employee had access to each disclosure that customers suspected of being re-disclosed by the threat actor. The threat actor created a HackerOne sock puppet account and had received bounties in a handful of disclosures. After identifying these bounties as likely improper, HackerOne reached out to the relevant payment providers who worked cooperatively with us to provide additional information. Following the money trail, we received confirmation that the threat actor's bounty was linked to an account that financially benefited a then HackerOne employee. Continues the report. Analysis of the threat actor's network traffic provided supplemental evidence connecting the threat actor's primary and sock puppet accounts. The company notified customers about the bug reports that were accessed by the employee. Found no evidence that the vulnerability data accessed was misused. The company announced a series of additional improvements, such as implementing additional logging processes to improve incident response, implementing data isolation to reduce the blast radius, planning additional red team activities, and enhancing processes to identify anomalous access and proactively detect insider threats. Unknown threat actors claim to have obtained data of a billion Chinese residents after breaching a database of the Shanghai police. If the incident will be confirmed, this data breach is the largest one in the country's history. Shanghai authorities have not publicly responded to the purported hack. Representatives of the city's police and cyberspace administration of China, the country's internet overseer, did not immediately respond to faxed requests for comment. Faxed requests, not emailed, faxed requests. The database contained names, addresses, birthplaces, national IDs, phone numbers, and criminal case information of Chinese citizens. The hacker is offering the database on popular cybercrime forum for 10 Bitcoin. The anonymous internet user, identified as China Dan, posted on hacker forum breach forums last week offering to sell the more than 23 terabytes of data for 10 Bitcoin, which is equivalent to about 200 grand. The chief executive officer of cryptocurrency exchange Binance, Zhao Zhangpeng, on July 3rd announced that the threat intelligence team of his company had detected the 1 billion resident records available for sale in a cybercrime forum. At this time, it's unclear how threat actors have obtained access to the database of the Shanghai police. Cybersecurity experts speculate the data leak resulted from the compromise of a third-party cloud infrastructure service provider. AstraLocker ransomware operators told Blippy Computer they're shutting down the operation and providing decryptors to the virus total malware analysis platform. AstraLocker is based on the source code of the Babuk Locker ransomware that was leaked online in June 2021. Blippy Computer tested the decryptors and confirmed they're legit. The threat actors behind AstraLocker told Blippy Computer that they plan to abandon the extortion and switch to cryptojacking. Yeah, good for them. The real reason behind the decision to cease the operation could be the pressure by law enforcement in response to their recent attacks. Blippy Computer also confirmed that cybersecurity firm MCSoft is working on a universal decryptor for AstraLocker ransomware that will allow victims to recover their files for free. Recently, researchers from Reversing Labs discovered some samples of the AstraLocker 2.0 malware that have been distributed through mole spam campaigns using weaponized Microsoft Word documents. Experts also noticed that a Monero wallet address used by the group for the ransomware payment is tied to the Chaos Ransomware group. The smash and grab attack methodology, as well as other features, suggest the attacker behind this malware is low skill and looking to cause disruption. Compared with the more patient, methodical, and measured approach to compromises used by Babuk and other more sophisticated ransomware outfits, reported Reversing Labs, this underscores the risk posed to organizations following code leaks like that affecting Babuk, as a large population of low-skill, high-motivation actors leverage the leak code for use in their own attacks. The Twitter and YouTube accounts of the British Army were used to promote NFT and other crypto scams. The YouTube account was used to transmit an older Elon Musk clip that attempts to trick users into visiting cryptocurrency scam sites. The attackers hijacked the verified Twitter account of the British Army, changed the profile images, and renamed it to Psst. After the UK's Ministry of Defence regained control of its accounts, they launched an investigation into the incident and apologized for the security breach. At this time, it's not clear how the attackers compromised the accounts simultaneously, or if they were even protected with two-factor authentication. In the latter case, threat actors could have obtained access to the account through SIM swapping attacks. Iran's Fars News Agency reported on Monday that operating systems and servers of the Tel Aviv metro were hit by a massive cyber attack. The rail system is still under construction, and according to the Jerusalem Post, the infrastructure is the subject of a political debate in Israel. The Fars agency later reported that the attack hit one of the companies involved in the construction of the Tel Aviv metro. Sabarin, a militant Palestinian group, claimed the attack through its Telegram channel. However, the diffusion of news of the attack could be part of propaganda against Israel, according to local media. Iran will often launder rumors online to try to make them appear to be reality. At other times, it uses this method to disseminate information it wants to communicate to the public, states the Jerusalem Post. The Fars agency later reported that the attack hit one of the companies involved in the construction of the Tel Aviv metro. This was the second time that the government websites and servers of the Zionist regime have been targeted by cyber attacks from Iraq, the report said. The latest attack of this type dates back to the end of last June. According to Saparin's Telegram channel, the Iraqi hacker group Al-Tahera targeted the Israeli Digital Intelligence Agency. You don't necessarily hear about Iraqi hacker groups as much as you do Russian, Ukrainian, etc., these days at least. Researchers from Reversing Labs discovered a couple dozen of NPM packages that included malicious code designed to steal data from apps and web forms on websites that included the modules. The malicious NPM modules were delivered as part of a widespread campaign tracked as Icon Burst that, according to the experts, has been active at least since 2021. One of the tainted packages had been downloaded more than 17,000 times. Upon closer inspection, we discovered evidence of a coordinated supply chain attack with a large number of NPM packages containing jQuery scripts designed to steal form data from deployed applications that include them. While the full extent of this attack isn't yet known, the malicious packages we discovered are likely used by hundreds, if not thousands, of downstream mobile and desktop applications, as well as websites, read the analysis published by Reversing Labs. Threat actors relied on typo squatting. They used packages via public repositories with names that are similar to or common misspellings of legitimate packages. Some of the malicious packages impersonated popular NPM modules like Umbrella.js and packages published by Ionic.io. List of malicious packages with the corresponding download count include Icon package with 17,774 downloads, Footer Icon with 1,903 downloads, Ionico with 3,724, and Ajax Labs with 2,440. Experts pointed out that initially, the threat actors took a conservative approach to harvesting form data, but most recently, published malicious packages were designed to acquire as much data as possible. Analysis of the modules reveals evidence of coordination, with malicious modules traceable to a small number of NPM publishers and consistent patterns in supporting infrastructure such as exfiltration domains, concluded the researchers. This attack marks a significant escalation in software supply chain attacks. Malicious code bundled within the NPM modules is running within an unknown number of mobile and desktop applications and web pages, harvesting untold amounts of user data. The operators of the Hive ransomware upgraded their malware by migrating the malware to Rust language and implementing a more sophisticated encryption method, Microsoft researchers warn. The upgrades in the latest variant are effectively an overhaul. The most notable changes include a full code migration to another programming language and the use of a more complex encryption method, reads the post published by Microsoft. The impact of these updates is far-reaching, considering that Hive is a ransomware-as-a-service payload that Microsoft has observed in attacks against organizations in the healthcare and software industries by large ransomware affiliates like Dev0237. These upgrades prove that Hive is one of the fastest evolving ransomware families in the cybercrime ecosystem. The Hive ransomware operation has been active since June 2021. It provides ransomware as a service Hive and adopts a double extortion model threatening to publish data stolen from the victims on their leak site, which is Hive Leaks. In April 2021, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has released a flash alert on the Hive ransomware attacks that includes technical details and indicators of compromise associated with the operations of the gang. According to a report published by blockchain analytics company Chain Analysis, the Hive ransomware is one of the top 10 ransomware strains by revenue in 2021. The group used a variety of attack methods, including spam campaigns, vulnerable RDP servers, and compromised VPN credentials. The Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center researchers discovered the new variant while analyzing a new technique used by ransomware for dropping .key files. The main difference between the new variant of the Hive ransomware and old ones is the programming language used by the operators. The old variants were written in Go language, while the new variant is written in Rust. Other ransomware families have migrated their code to Rust, such as the Black Cat one, which was the first. The porting to Rust language provides the following advantages to the hackers, of course. It offers memory, data type, and thread safety. It has deep control over low-level resources. It has a user-friendly syntax. It has several mechanisms for concurrency and parallelism, thus enabling fast and safe file encryption. It has a good variety of cryptographic libraries. It's relatively more difficult to reverse engineer. The most important change in the latest Hive variant is the encryption mechanism it adopts. The new variant was first uploaded to VirusTotal on February 22, 2022, just a few days after a group of researchers from Kookmin University in South Korea shared details about research on how to decrypt data from systems infected with the Hive ransomware. The new variant uses a different set of algorithms, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman with Curve 25519, and XChaCha20 Poly 1305 authenticated encryption with ChaCha20 symmetric cipher, continues Microsoft. The new variant generates 2 sets of keys in memory, uses them to encrypt the files, then encrypts and writes the sets to the root of the drive and encrypts, both with .key extension. The old variants instead were embedded an encrypted key in each file that they encrypted. The analysis of the latest variant revealed the uses of string encryption that can make it more evasive. In the old Hive variants, the credentials to access the Hive ransomware payment website were embedded in the samples. In the new variant, they must be supplied in the command line under the -u parameter. This change implied that it is impossible to obtain them by analyzing the sample. Researchers from Palo Alto Network's Unit 42 discovered that a sample uploaded to VirusTotal database on May 19, 2022, and considered benign by almost all the antivirus, was containing a payload associated with BrutRetel C4 or BRc4, a new red teaming and adversarial attack simulation tool. Unlike Cobalt Strike beacons, BRc4 payloads are less popular, but with similar capabilities. The tool was specifically designed to avoid detection by security solutions such as endpoint detection and response and antivirus. Its effectiveness at doing so can clearly be witnessed by the aforementioned lack of detection across vendors on VirusTotal. BrutRetel is the most advanced red team and adversarial simulation software in the current C2 market. It can not only emulate different stages of an attack kill chain, but also provide a systematic timeline and graph for each of the attacks executed to help the security operations team validate the attacks and improve the internal defensive mechanisms, reads the description of the tool on its own website. BrutRetel comes pre-built with several OPEC features, which can ease a red team's task to focus more on the analytical part of an engagement instead of focusing on depending on open source tools for post-exploitation. BrutRetel is a post-exploitation command and control in the end and, however, does not provide exploit generation features like Metasploit or vulnerability scanning features like Nessus, Accunetrics, or Burp Suite. The file was uploaded to VirusTotal on, again, May 19, 2022 from Sri Lanka. It is named Russian_cv.iso and poses as a curriculum vitae. Upon clicking on the ISO file, users are presented with an apparent harmless Word document, but after launching it, the attack chain will start. An instance of the BRc4 is installed on the user's machine and attempts to contact a remote server. According to Unit 42 experts, threat actors are spreading the ISO files via spear phishing messages. The delivery of the packaged ISO file is typically sent via spear phishing email campaigns, although it's not clear if the same method was used to deliver the payload to the target environment. The experts noticed that the composition of the ISO file, Russian_cv.iso, is highly compatible with TTPs associated with the Russia-linked APT29 group. The Russia-linked APT29 group, aka SVR, aka Cozy Bear, aka the Dukes, has been active since at least 2014. Along with APT28, Cyber Espionage Group was involved in the Democratic National Committee hack and the wave of attacks aimed at the 2016 U.S. presidential elections. The group is suspected to be the threat actor that launched the SolarWinds supply chain attack. The composition of the ISO file, Russian_cv.iso, closely resembles that of the other nation-state tradecraft. The following table shows a side-by-side comparison of Russian_cv.iso and that of a previously identified APT29 sample, decrypt.iso, reads the analysis published by the Palo Alto Networks. Of course, I don't have that side-by-side, but they did the research and they found a comparison. The researchers also spotted a second sample that was uploaded to VirusTotal from Ukraine a day after the Russian_cv.iso file was uploaded. The experts observed significant code overlaps of a module used to load BRc4 into memory. Further investigation allowed the researchers to discover 7 more BRc4 samples dating back to February 2021. The analysis of the C2 server allowed the experts to identify a number of potential victims, including an Argentinian organization, an IP television provider providing North and South America content, and a major textile manufacturer in Mexico. The emergence of a new penetration testing and adversarial emulation capability is significant, yet more alarming is the effectiveness of BRc4 at defeating modern defensive EDR and AV detection capabilities. Hotel chain Marriott International confirmed it has suffered a new data breach after a threat actor stole 20 gigabytes of files from one of its properties. The attack compromised the network at the BWI Airport, Maryland, as confirmed later by the company. The threat actor told databreaches.net website that they had access to the Marriott properties network about a month ago. They also added that the 20 gigabytes of data exfiltration included some credit card information and confidential information. According to statements made to data breaches, the attackers also notified numerous employees at Marriott about the security breach. The company initially responded to them, but later interrupted any communication. This incident only involved one property. The threat actor did not gain access to Marriott's core network. The access to one device at the property involved only lasted for approximately 6 hours, a Marriott spokesperson told the media. The threat actor attempted to extort Marriott by threatening to leak the stolen files, but the company refused to pay a ransom and notified the authorities. Marriott also hired a leading cybersecurity firm to investigate the security breach. Marriott acknowledged that while most of the data acquired by GNN was what Marriott described as non-sensitive internal business files, they'll be notifying approximately 300 to 400 individuals and any regulators as required. They did not provide a full description as to what kinds of personal information were involved for the individuals being notified. This isn't the first incident suffered by Marriott. The list of some of the security breaches it was the victim of include November 2008, Starwood data breach. Hackers accessed the guest reservation system of the Marriott-owned Starwood going back to 2014 and copied and encrypted the information of about 327 million guests. Then in March 2021, Marriott disclosed a new security breach detected at the end of February 2020 that could impact up to 5.2 million of its guests. The FBI, the CISA, and the U.S. Treasury Department issued a joint advisory that warned of North Korea-linked threat actors using Maui Ransomware in attacks aimed at organizations in the healthcare sector. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Department of the Treasury are releasing this joint advisory, cybersecurity advisory to provide information on Maui Ransomware, which has been used by North Korea state-sponsored cyber actors since at least May 2021 to target healthcare and public health, or HPH, sector organizations, reads the advisory published by the authorities. The attacks against healthcare and public health sector organizations started in May 2021, and government experts observed multiple cases that involved the use of the Maui ransomware. The report provides information about tactics, techniques, and procedures of the threat actors using the Maui ransomware, along with indicators of compromise that were obtained by government experts during incident response activities and industry analysis of a Maui sample. North Korean nation-state actors used Maui ransomware to encrypt servers providing healthcare services, including electronic health records services, diagnostic services, imaging services, and intranet services. The report confirmed that in some cases, the attacks disrupted the services provided by the targeted HPH sector organizations for prolonged periods. The joint report refers to an industry analysis of a sample of Maui provided in Stairwell Threat Report Maui ransomware. According to the analysis, the malware appears to be human-operated ransomware. Checkmarx researchers spotted a new large-scale cryptocurrency mining campaign tracked as Cute Boy that is targeting the NPM JavaScript package repository. Threat actors behind the campaign published 1,283 malicious modules in the repository and used over 1,000 different user accounts. The researchers uncovered the supply chain attack after noticing a burst of suspicious NPM users and packages automatically created. Checkmarx SCS team detected over 1,200 NPM packages released to the registry by over 1,000 different user accounts. This was done using automation, which includes the ability to bypass NPM two-factor authentication challenge. This cluster of packages seems to be a part of an attacker experimenting at this point, reads the post published by Checkmarx. We dubbed this new actor Cute Boy as a tribute to the cute username hard-coded in many of the packages, configuration files, and to one of the non-random NPM usernames the attacker is using, CloudyBoy12. The rogue packages contain a duplicate of the code of the EasyMiner package, a JS wrapper on the XMRig mining software. The wrapper was designed to utilize unused resources of systems such as CI/CD and web servers. The researchers pointed out that installing the malicious packages will have no negative effect on the machine. The miner functionality can be triggered from within another program and does not work as a standalone tool. This means that it won't run upon installation. Cute Boy relies on a disposable email service called mail.tm to automate the creation of the users that uploads the packages to the NPM repository. Mail.tm provides REST API to allow to open disposable mailboxes and read the received emails sent to them with the simple API call. In this, operators behind the Cute Boy campaign can bypass NPM two-factor authentication challenge when creating a user account. Qpoi is the second attack group seen this year using automation to launch large-scale attacks on NPM. We expect we will continue to see more of these attacks as the barrier to launch them is getting lower, concludes the reports. Recently, security experts spotted another large-scale supply chain attack tracked as Icon Burst, which we talked about 10 or 15 minutes ago, which aimed at stealing sensitive data from forms embedded in downstream mobile applications and websites. The Taiwanese vendor QNAP is warning of a new family of ransomware targeting its NAS devices using weak passwords. Threat actors are targeting devices exposed online with the SMB service enabled. They perform brute force attacks against accounts using weak passwords. A new ransomware known as Checkmate has recently been brought to our attention. Preliminary investigation indicates that Checkmate attacks via SMB services exposed to the internet and employs a dictionary attack to break accounts with weak passwords, reads the advisory published by the vendor. Once the attacker successfully logs into a device, they encrypt data in shared folders and leave a ransom note with the file name Checkmate Decryption README in each folder. The ransomware appends the .checkmate extension to the file names of the encrypted files and again drops the ransom note named Checkmate Decryption README on the affected devices. Bleepy Computer reported that several users on its forum claimed to have been infected with the Checkmate ransom in June. According to the ransom note, the victims have to pay a $15,000 ransom in Bitcoin to receive the decryptor. The vendor recommends not exposing the SMB service to the internet and using VPN to access the NAS and reduce the attack surface. QNAP also recommends disabling SMB1 and updating the operating system to the latest version. The advisory also suggests reviewing all NAS accounts immediately to ensure that they are using strong passwords and, of course, back up data and take snapshots regularly. IBM researchers collected evidence indicating that the Russia-based cybercriminal Trickbot Group, aka Wizard Spider, aka Dev0193, aka ITG23, has been systematically attacking Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian invasion of the country. Since February, the Conti ransomware group has taken over Trickbot malware operation and also planned to replace it with bizarre backdoor malware. Between mid-April and mid-June of 2022, the Trickbot Group has conducted at least 6 campaigns against entities in Ukraine. The experts observed the threat actors deploying multiple malware, Iced ID, Cobalt Strike, Anchor Mail, and Meterpreter. Experts pointed out that prior to the Russian invasion, the Trickbot gang hasn't targeted Ukraine, and the malware used by the group was configured to not execute on systems using the Ukrainian language. ITG23's campaigns against Ukraine are notable due to the extent to which this activity differs from historical precedent and the fact that these campaigns appeared specifically aimed at Ukraine with some payloads that suggest a higher degree of target selection, reads a technical report published by IBM Security X-Force. The systematic attacks observed against Ukraine include reported and suspected phishing attacks against Ukrainian state authorities, Ukrainian individuals and organizations, and the general population. The campaign resulted in the theft of sensitive data and the deployment of ransomware to damage Ukraine's economy. In some of the attacks, threat actors used an Excel document named nuclear.xls, suggesting an alarming lure. Once opened, the document downloads a WinRAR self-extracting archive that delivers the Anchor Mail backdoor to the victim's system. Experts also observed attacks dropping Iced ID and Cobalt Strike. Cybersecurity firm MCSoft released a free decryptor tool that allows victims of the AstraLocker and Yashma ransomware to recover their files without paying a ransom. Again, as we said, just read in the past 15 minutes or so, AstraLocker decided to close down and provided free decryptors or free keys themselves. Now, MCSoft has created a free decryptor tool. The security firm states that the AstraLocker decryptor works for ransomware versions based on the Babuk malware that appends the .astra and .babuk extensions to the name of the encrypted files. The Yashma decryptor, released by the company, works for the chaos-based versions using .astralocker or a random letter number combination extension. The researchers also shared a step-by-step guide to use their tool and a series of recommendations to sanitize the victim's systems. In case a system was compromised through the Windows Remote Desktop feature, the experts recommend changing all passwords of all users that are allowed to log in remotely, and check the local user accounts for additional accounts the attacker might have actually added. Be sure to quarantine the malware from your system first, or it may repeatedly lock your system or encrypt files. If your current antivirus solution fails to detect the malware, it can be quarantined using the free trial version of MCSoft Anti-Malware, reads the guide. If your system was compromised through the Windows Remote Desktop feature, we also recommend changing all passwords of all users that are allowed to log in remotely, and check the local user accounts for additional accounts the attacker might have added. The decryptor by default will not remove any encrypted files at the end of the decryption process. This option was implemented because the tool can't guarantee that the decrypted data is identical to the one that was previously encrypted. Last week, the AstraLocker ransomware operators told Bleeping Computer they were shutting down, as I said at the beginning of this particular article. The CyberReason Global Security Operations Center team published the CyberReason Threat Analysis Reports that investigates the threat landscape and provides recommendations to mitigate their attacks. The researchers focused on the evolution of the LockBit ransomware. They detailed 2 infections occurring at 2 very different time periods, highlighting the evolution of the operations. CyberReason researchers documented the evolution of the LockBit ransomware that uses multiple techniques to infect target systems. The ransomware operators are improving their techniques to disable endpoint detection and response tools and other security solutions. LockBit operates on a ransomware as a service model. The affiliates that use LockBit services conduct their attacks according to their preference and use different tools and techniques to achieve their goal. As the attack progresses further along the kill chain, the activities from different cases tend to converge to similar activities, reads the analysis published by the experts. LockBit Ransomware Service enables affiliates to use existing ransomware tools and infrastructure to carry out their own attacks, sharing a percentage of the payment. In the first attack documented by researchers, which took place in the fourth quarter of 2021, the affiliates working with LockBit Gang used their own malware and tools to compromise the targets. In most of the infections analyzed by the researchers, threat actors compromised the target networks by exploiting a misconfigured server's particularly publicly open RDP port. In other cases, affiliates would use a more traditional phishing email that will allow them to remotely connect to a network via an employee's computer, or utilize malicious attachments, downloads, application patch exploits, or vulnerabilities to gain access to a network, continues the report. Once the threat actors established an initial foothold on the compromised network, they start the reconnaissance activity and credentials extraction using tools such as Mimikatz and NetScan. The second infection detailed by the researchers took place in the second quarter of 2022. The researchers detailed the various stages of the attack, from the initial compromise, lateral movements, establishing persistence, escalation of privileges, and the final ransomware development. The attackers leveraged net.exe to create a domain account and elevate their privileges to domain administrator. Then they used the accounts to achieve persistence and spread on the victim's network. The researchers also noticed the use of ngrok, a legitimate reverse proxy tool that allows the attackers to create a tunnel to servers located behind firewalls. The threat actors also infected additional machines in the target network with the malware Neshta, which is a file infector that injects its malicious code to targeted executable. At this point, the LockBit affiliate had completed all the necessary steps to execute the LockBit payload and commence encryption, which means persistence on the network through multiple infected machines, access to top privileged accounts. They collected and exfiltrated victim data. Then they have a list of most assets through network discovery and scans. The experts also shared indicators of compromise along with MITRE mapping. Recently, the LockBit ransomware operation has released their LockBit 3.0, which has important novelties such as a bug bounty program, Zcash payment, and new extortion tactics. The gang has been active since at least 2019, and today it's one of the most active ransomware gangs. Raspberry Robin is a Windows worm discovered by cybersecurity researchers from Red Canary. The malware propagates through removable USB devices. The malicious code uses Windows Installer to reach out to QNAP-associated domains and download a malicious DLL. The malware uses Tor exit nodes as a backup command and control infrastructure. The malware was first spotted in September 2021. The experts observed Raspberry Robin targeting organizations in the technology and manufacturing industries. Initial access is typically through infected removable drives, often USB devices. Raspberry Robin is typically introduced via infected removable drives, often USB devices. The Raspberry Robin worm often appears as a shortcut.link file, masquerading as a legitimate folder on the infected USB device. Continues the analysis. Soon after the Raspberry Robin infected drive is connected to the system, the user assist registry entry is updated and records execution of the RUT13 ciphered value, referencing a link file when deciphered. In the example, there is a erpbiral.ex, which deciphers to recovery.link. The malware uses command.exe to read and execute a file stored on the infected external drive. It leverages msi-execute.exe for external network communication to a rogue domain used as a command and control to download and install a DLL library file. The msi-execute launches a legitimate Windows utility, fodhelper.exe, which in turn runs rundll32.exe to execute a malicious command. Experts pointed out that processes launched by fodhelper run with elevated administrative privileges without requiring a user account control prompt. According to the researchers, looking for fodhelper as a parent process, it is possible to detect the threat. Last week, Microsoft confirmed that the threat was discovered on the networks of multiple customers, including organizations in the technical and manufacturing sectors. Now, CyberReason researchers reported multiple infections in Europe. The experts investigated a series of recent infections also associated with the name Linkworm. The attacks monitored by the researchers are leveraging compromised QNAP, network attached storage, and NAS devices as command and control systems. The infection chain associated with the ongoing Raspberry Robin campaign observed by CyberReason is as follows. The Raspberry Robin related infections start from two files present in the same directory hosted on an external device or shared drive. The link file that contains a Windows shell command and another file that acts as a bat file filled with padding data and two specific commands. Raspberry Robin leverages the lol bin called msi-execute.exe to download and execute a malicious shared library from a compromised NAS device from the vendor QNAP. To make it harder to detect, Raspberry Robin leverages process injections in 3 legitimate Windows system processes, and it communicates with the rest of Raspberry Robin's infrastructure through the Tor exit nodes. To persist on the infected system, Raspberry Robin uses a registry key to automatically load a malicious module through the Windows binary run-dll32.exe at the machine startup. The malware maintains persistence on the compromised machine through the Windows registry. It loads the run-dll32 at the startup. The campaign monitored by CyberReason dates back to September 2021, and this time the company has yet to attribute it to a specific threat actor, and its goal is actually still a mystery. The recommendations provided by CyberReason include block outgoing connections outside of the organization to Tor-related addresses as Raspberry Robin actively communicates with Tor exit nodes. As Raspberry Robin displays persistent mechanisms and establishes many masquerading actions on the infected system, re-image infected devices. Threat hunting with CyberReason. CyberReason MDR team. Okay, so that's an ad, so we're just going to skip that. Fortinet FortiGuard Labs researchers observed a phishing campaign that is leveraging the recently disclosed Folina security vulnerability, CVE 2022-30190 with a CVSS score of 7.8, to distribute the Rosina backdoor on Windows systems. The Folina issue is a remote code execution vulnerability that resides in the Microsoft Windows Support Diagnostic tool. The Rosina backdoor is able to inject a remote shell connection back to the attacker's machine. The attack chain leverages a weaponized Office document that, once clicked, it starts connecting to an external Discord CDN URL to download an HTML file. Then the HTML file invokes the msd.exe tool with a PowerShell command, which also invokes another web request to download the Rosina backdoor and save it as word.exe. PowerShell code will download one batch file, cd.bat, and start it with no window to hide itself. Then it invokes another web request to download Rosina and save it as word.exe in the Windows Tasks folder, reads the post published by Fortinet FortiGuard Labs. The attacker decided to distract the victim. The original file has no content besides an external linked-in OLE object. To keep the victim from noticing anything odd, the batch file downloads another Word document with a lot of pictures in it. To make it seem more real, this document is saved in the directory users environment username downloads with a shorter name. The main feature of the Rosina backdoor is to inject shellcode that launches a reverse shell to the attacker's machine. In this way, the attacker can take full control of the system. Once the Rosina executable is run, it'll create a process for PowerShell command. Experts pointed out that the decoded command has only one job to do, which is injecting the shellcode. The ransomware attack hit French telephone operator La Poste Mobile. Now, it hit the virtual mobile telephone operator on July 4th and paralyzed administrative and management services. The company pointed out that threat actors may have accessed data of its customers. For this reason, it is recommending them to be vigilant. The company highlights the risks of identity theft or phishing attacks in case their data has been compromised. The administrative and management services of La Poste Mobile fell victim on Monday, July 4th to a malicious ransomware type virus. As soon as we became aware of this incident, we took the necessary protective measures by immediately suspending the computer systems concerned. This protective action has led us to temporarily close our website and our customer area, reads a statement published by the company on its website that's still down. Our IT teams are currently diagnosing the situation. Our first analysis established that our servers essential to the operation of your mobile line have been well protected. On the other hand, it is possible that files present in the computers of La Poste Mobile employees have been affected. Some of them may contain personal data. For any additional information concerning personal data, customers can contact La Poste Telecom customer service at an email address of them. The LockBit ransomware operation added the name of Poste Mobile to its leak site overnight from Thursday to Friday, so we now know that it was LockBit that did it. The gang has been active since at least 2019, and we know all this information. They now have a bug bounty program, they accept Zcash, and they have new extortion tactics. Recent incidents attributed to the LockBit group include attacks on Foxconn Factory, a Canadian fighter jet training company, and a popular German library service. Hey, we now move on to other security news. In May, the US CISA removed the CVE 2022-26925 Windows LSA vulnerability from its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog due to Active Directory certificate authentication problems observed after the installation of Microsoft May 2022 Patch Tuesday security updates. CISA is temporarily removing CVE 2022-26925 from its known exploited vulnerability catalog due to a risk of authentication failures when the May 10th, 2022 Microsoft Rollup update is applied to domain controllers. So, the known exploited vulnerability catalog is important, except when it messes up a system. So after installing May 10th, 2020 rollup update on domain controllers, organizations might experience authentication failures on the server or client for services such as Network Policy Server, Routing and Remote Access Server, Radius, Extensible Authentication Protocol, and Protected Extensible Authentication Protocol, reads the advisory published by CISA. Microsoft notified CISA of this issue, which is related to how the mapping of certificates to machine accounts is being handled by the domain controller. According to Binding Operation Directive 22-01, reducing the significant risk of known exploited vulnerabilities, FCEB agencies have to address the identified vulnerabilities by due dates to protect their networks against attacks exploiting the flaws in the catalog, again, unless that fix breaks something else. Experts recommend also private organizations review the catalog and address the vulnerabilities in their infrastructure. Of course they would. The flaw is a Windows LSA spoofing vulnerability actively exploited in the wild. So this is an actively exploited vulnerability in the wild that Microsoft tried to fix with one of the Patch Tuesdays, but that patch broke the way the certificates are read, so now the CISA has decided to temporarily remove this extremely important attacked in the wild or exploited in the wild vulnerability from their list of things that you have to fix. The vulnerability can be exploited by an unauthenticated attacker to force a domain controller to authenticate against another server using NTLM. An unauthenticated attacker could call a method on the LSARPC interface and coerce the domain controller to authenticate to the attacker using NTLM. This security update detects anonymous connection attempts in LSARPC and disallows it, reads the advisory published by Microsoft. The cyber police of the Ukraine arrested 9 members of a cyber criminal organization that stole 100 million hryvnias via phishing attacks. The crooks raided more than 400 phishing sites to obtain the banking data of Ukrainian citizens under the guise of social security payments from the EU. Phishing sites were hosting an application form to fill out to receive financial assistance from the European Union. 9 people created and administered more than 400 fake web resources for obtaining banking data of citizens. Through the websites, Ukrainians were offered a form that they could fill out for the payment of financial assistance from the countries of the European Union. Using phishing links, victims took surveys and entered bank card details. Once the banking data was obtained, the cybercriminals carried out unauthorized access to the victims' online banking and withdrew money from their accounts. The gang defrauded more than 5,000 citizens, stealing a total of about 100 million hryvnias. The police searched the home of the suspects and seized computer equipment, mobile phones, bank cards, and money obtained through the illicit activities. The cyber police urged citizens to obtain information about financial payments only from official sources and avoid clicking dubious links and never provide personal and financial information to third parties posing at government agencies. Resecurity, a Los Angeles-based cybersecurity company protecting Fortune 500 companies worldwide, has registered an increase in malicious activity targeting law enforcement agencies at the beginning of the second quarter of 2022. Threat actors are hacking email and other accounts which belong to police officers and their internal systems. The emerging trend consists of threat actors sending fake subpoenas and EDRs, emergency data requests, to their victims from the hacked law enforcement email accounts. Using such capabilities, the threat actors are targeting major technology companies such as Apple, Facebook, Snapchat, and Discord, to name a few, to collect sensitive information about targets of interest. The replies received by the bad actors contain sensitive details which could or are being used for leverage extortion or cyber espionage. Such incidents have become especially especially notable in cybercriminal group activity such as Lapsus and Recursion Group. RE Security has been observing multiple dark web marketplaces where cybercriminals are monetizing their efforts by selling credentials belonging to police officers of various foreign countries, emails, VPNs, SSO, etc. One example of an email account previously used to send fake EDR requests on behalf of the Bangladesh police was recently covered in a Bloomberg article illustrating the risk of such tactics. Based on experts' opinion, one of the biggest concerns is the visible insecurity of the law enforcement IT infrastructure. Such infrastructure creates significant risk to our society, not just in cyberspace, but in real life, too. Organized crime, terrorists, and extremist groups may leverage such access for malicious purposes. The trend is continuing to grow in popularity as more law enforcement organizations have been impacted by cyber attacks this month. Just recently, the Conti ransomware group claimed to attack the intelligence agency in Peru and leaked their data, which created a significant precedent in the security community. DDoS Secrets, another notable group of threat actors, has released 285,635 leaked emails from Nauru police. The most typical scenarios involving attacks on law enforcement systems include protest activity, unauthorized access, cyber espionage, law enforcement systems and applications abuse, and data theft. Based on the published research, such malicious activity is especially visible in countries of Latin America, Southeast Asia, and also offshore jurisdictions. Last year, ReSecurity registered a targeted security incident related to one of the law enforcement organizations in the Middle East and its counterpart in the face of one of the international police organizations. Sophisticated bad actors and app groups are actively targeting law enforcement agencies worldwide. Traditional cybercriminals are also an important component in this process, as state-supported actors may be actively collaborating with them for further planned cyber attacks and targeted network intrusions. Investigation of such incidents is a complicated process due to the significant sensitivity involved, said Christian Lee, CTO of ReSecurity Incorporated. The recent wave of sophisticated attacks against Apple users, like Pegasus, Devil's Tongue, and Hermit, urged the tech giant to develop a new security feature called Lockdown Mode to protect its users against highly targeted cyber attacks. The new feature will be implemented in iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and macOS Ventura, but is already available for preview in beta versions of its upcoming software. Lockdown Mode offers an extreme operational level of security for the very few users who, because of who they are or what they do, may be personally targeted by some of the most sophisticated digital threats, such as those from NSO Group and other private companies developing state-sponsored mercenary spyware, reads the announcement published by Apple. Turning on Lockdown Mode in iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and macOS Ventura further hardens device defenses and strictly limits certain functionalities, sharply reducing the attack surface that potentially could be exploited by highly targeted mercenary spyware. The first version of the new security feature will implement the following protections. For messages, most message attachment types other than images are blocked. Some features, like link previews, are disabled. For web browsing, certain complex web technologies, like just-in-time JavaScript compilation, are disabled unless the user excludes a trusted site from lockdown mode. For Apple services, incoming invitations and service requests, including FaceTime calls, are blocked if the user himself has not previously sent the initiator a call or request. Wired connections with a computer or accessory are blocked when iPhone is locked. Configuration profiles cannot be installed, and the device cannot enroll into mobile device management while lockdown mode is turned on. Apple also created a new category within its bug bounty program to reward researchers who will demonstrate exploits to bypass lockdown mode. Apple will pay up to a maximum of $2 million for demonstrating flaws in lockdown mode. The company pointed out that it is the highest maximum bounty payout in the industry. The IT giant also plans to offer a $10 million grant to support organizations that investigate, expose, and prevent highly targeted cyber attacks, including those using exploits created by private companies and sold to nation-state actors. And that's the news. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Don't forget to ride. Farewell.